This story happened to me about 6 months ago. I have lived where I live for 3 years. It's a nice apartment in an amazing location, but they were built in the late 90s. The last few years, the city I live in has hit a massive population boom and people have been pouring in non-stop. Because of this, I have seen the landlord's staff start to do heavy maintenance on the apartments to bring them up to date to attract more people to buy them. My neighbour lived in his apartment for something like 6 years before he ended up buying a house and moved. When he moved, the landlord immediately started redoing his apartment as one to bring up to date. The way that the apartment layout is, there are 2 stories. Where my bedroom is, on the direct other side of the bedroom wall is the staircase in my neighbour's apartment. My bedroom is laid out with my bed right up against that wall. They were completely stripping this place clean. It was one of the first ones that they did such heavy remodeling to. For weeks I would always see the workers over there painting and redoing the floors, etc. A few days before this happened was no different. I left and saw them doing maintenance on the kitchen, and when I came home from work they were gone for the day. Nothing unusual, a single bit. I was awake around 1 AM watching TV in my room when I heard someone on the other side of the wall slowly walking up the stairs and very obviously stopping halfway up. Where the person was stopping was directly where my head laid on the other side of the wall. I could feel him listening to me breathing. I immediately turned the TV sound off and sat there extremely quiet and still. I heard nothing for a few minutes. Finally, after what felt like an absolute eternity, I heard the person start walking the rest of the stairs to the 2nd floor. My survival instinct kicked in instantly. It was very obvious that someone was on the other side of that wall listening to me. I also knew that it was only a few days before this happened that I saw the maintenance redoing that apartment's kitchen. I knew there was no way somebody already moved in that fast. I quietly got out of bed and went to a room where I had a better view of the outside of the apartment. I obviously couldn't see if there was movement in there from the window, but I had a good angle to see if anyone walked out. I sat there for about 15 minutes, just staring outside to see if I saw anything at all. Nothing. I went back into my room and laid down in bed again. I didn't play the TV. I just sat there waiting to hear something again. I was messing around on my phone for about 20 minutes in silence until I heard movement in the stairs again. This time, though, the movement didn't start from the top or the bottom. The movement started in the middle of the staircase. Meaning that the entire time I was sitting there in silence, the person was just on the other side of the wall listening to my every move. This terrified me, so I called the cops. I gave them all the information of what was going on, and they informed me someone would be out very soon. I went back to the one room and watched out the window again. Only a few moments later, a police car pulled up and a cop got out to examine the building and apartment. He was looking around and shining his light in the windows. I heard him knock on the door, and shortly after I could hear him talking to someone, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. I was totally puzzled by this. The officer walked over to my door and knocked. I went downstairs and he informed me very nicely that someone just moved in there. I laughed and was completely embarrassed. I even said to the cop that it was a hell of a way to meet your new neighbour. I felt embarrassed, but more importantly felt very relieved about the entire situation. I brushed off the whole thing as it being very late and my mind playing massive tricks on me. The next day I went to leave my apartment when I saw something that made me stop dead in my tracks. I went outside and only took a few steps towards my car when I saw maintenance over there carrying out the old refrigerator. I was puzzled. I walked over to the apartment and I looked in the door that was wide open. The kitchen was still to be worked on and not a single piece of furniture could be seen. I was legitimately speechless. I walked over to a maintenance man and said, "Didn't someone move in here?" And he informed me no, and that the apartment wouldn't be ready for showings until at least 3 weeks from now. I ran back upstairs into my apartment and called my landlord. I asked her if someone was staying there, and she said absolutely not. I told her about what I experienced the night before. She was floored. She told me that they would change that apartment's locks immediately. She also suggested that I call the non-emergency line to the police department and inform them that no one lives there. I did just that, and they asked me to come down to the station. I told them all the information in detail of what happened. They were able to quickly figure out what officer came out to check the situation so he could help identify the person who answered the door. The officer described the man in detail, and I confirmed that I have never seen him around the apartments before. There was a search around town for a few weeks until the whole thing just sort of fizzled out and I stopped hearing about it and started seeing less and less patrol cars randomly in the parking lot. After that night, I never heard another thing from that apartment. About a month later, an older couple moved in, and they are very nice. When I saw the moving van pull up, I went out to introduce myself to them. But to be completely honest, the only reason I went out there was to see if any of them matched the description of who the cops saw. Not even close. I'm certain that the person who was in that apartment got away with it. I had an extremely hard time sleeping for the following weeks of that happening to me. I actually ended up moving my bed into the smaller second bedroom because it bothered me so much. I have zero idea what the intentions of the person were or what he was doing in that staircase. But it's easily one of the most chilling things that has ever happened to me. So, random man listening to me sleep, let's not meet again. I have encountered a person that I'll call Window Man, and he has really messed me up. This happened in summer 2018, so about 8 months ago. My mum and I moved into this one-room apartment with one of my mum's colleagues, all female, for a short period of time. So the apartment had a small bathroom and shower, a kitchen merged with the living room, a small room separated by a sliding door, and a windowed balcony. We lived on the first floor, and even I, being the little 5'4" girl I am, managed to climb up into the window when I forgot my keys at home. Anyway, since the colleague needed some privacy, she chose to live in the small room. My mum would sleep on the couch in the living room, and I'd sleep on the balcony on a mattress. Now, when I would lay on the mattress, from my point of view, I'd see the living room and the couch on my right, and the windows on the left, though there were some behind me that I wasn't really able to see. So we moved in, and everything was going great for the first month or so. I felt quite safe, even though I was very suspicious from the very start of the windows since we lived on the first floor. I should mention that I've never experienced anything paranormal, nor have I ever had sleep paralysis. So one night I wake up, or at least I think I do, and I can't move. I can only blink my eyes and move my head. I look over to the windows, and I see what looks like a third of a man's head and a hand peeking through the window. I tried to scream and get up, but I couldn't move or do anything. I was so terrified. I saw the man slowly closing the window as if he was trying to not make any sound, and lowering his head as if he were leaving. I was freaking out, but I still couldn't move. I saw my mum on my right, sleeping on the couch, and my left hand was hanging off the mattress. My cat was headbutting it as if he was trying to wake me. I tried to scream a few times, but it didn't work. I was hysterical at that point, and I felt tears welling up in my eyes. Suddenly I woke up. I shot up from my bed, my cat still next to the mattress and my mum still on the couch, sleeping in the same position I saw her in. I looked at the window panicking, and it was locked from the inside, just like I left it before going to sleep. I unlocked it and opened it, making sure that there was nobody outside. I closed and locked the window and lay back down, sobbing. I just cried myself to sleep that night. A few days later, I decided to tell my mum about the dream. I didn't want to at first because I thought that she wouldn't pay much attention to it. But since it had me so on edge, I told her, and just as expected, she told me that I've been listening to too many horror stories, and she didn't take me too seriously. After maybe a week, I forgot about the dream and I moved on. And then, one evening, everything was going fine. I was preparing myself for the next day since I had to do a big presentation in front of the whole class and I wanted to look my best. It was about midnight. I took a shower, brushed my teeth, and went to sleep as usual. My mum was still on her phone but about to go to sleep. I dozed off peacefully. Suddenly, I wake up for no reason and I have the massive urge to look behind me at the windows. To my horror, I saw a tall man in my window, about halfway in, with one leg almost on the floor. I panicked and I thought that I was dreaming again, but I quickly realized I can move, so no, I wasn't dreaming. Still being in a state of fear and confusion, I whispered, "What the fuck?" And to my complete horror, the man looked up, all dark but eyes shining in the moonlight, put on the creepiest ear-to-ear grin, put a finger to his lips, and said, in the most menacing way ever. I had no idea what to do, so I said louder, "What the fuck?" And then I jumped up and I screamed, "What the fuck?" And I started screaming like a banshee. The guy got startled and almost fell back, so I took the opportunity and closed and locked the window just as he was about to try to get back in. My screaming woke my mum up and she ran up asking what happened. I started nervously explaining all that happened, and then we saw the dude climb up to our window again, but the one right next to it, trying to open it. As I saw that, I screamed even louder, and as I was opening it, I pushed him and he fell down, calling me every name under the sun. He then tried to make up some shitty excuse, but in my panicked state, I started yelling at him at the top of my lungs to get the fuck out. I kept on yelling for about 5 minutes like a total crazy person, until the guy finally said something along the lines of "fine," almost as if I was obliged to let him in, and he started walking away. I slammed all the windows shut and locked them, sat down on my mattress, and proceeded to sob loudly as my mother was next to me, trying to calm me down. We thought that was it, but a few minutes later I saw him again, climbing up our balcony, and I started screaming again, opened one of the windows, and yelled so loud that I almost lost my voice. I closed and locked the door, and my mum and I went to the security guard to tell him what happened. I described the man to him as well as I could, but since it was dark I couldn't say much about his appearance. He told us to just go home and stay calm, that he'll handle the situation. When we were going back, we saw about 8 neighbours of ours standing outside wondering what had happened. They all gave us sympathetic looks as we went back home. My mum gave me some medicine to help calm me down, and I was crying and shaking vigorously for about an hour. After that, I finally was so exhausted that I just went to sleep with her, since I didn't want to sleep on the balcony anymore. The next day I showed up at school looking like trash, and when I told someone what happened, they either didn't believe me or they would brush it off saying, "It's fine, you're alright now." After a few days, my mum confronted me about it and said she was sorry she didn't take my dreams seriously. I wasn't mad, just shocked. She said that she was about to fall asleep but woke up to me screaming. She told me that my screams were the most blood-curdling ones she's ever heard in her life. But the scariest part is that I woke up for no reason. I just had the massive urge to look back. There was absolutely no noise when the man opened the window and was climbing in. I even asked my mother if she heard anything, and she said no, it was absolutely silent. Who knows what the man would have done if I hadn't woken up? I'm glad I didn't have to find out. Though sadly, I don't know what happened to that man, if he was arrested or not. We never saw him again. Either way, I'm just glad that we moved out of that apartment soon later. And to you, window man, that has traumatized me that day, let's not meet again. My sister has been married for several years, but this is the first time she genuinely felt unsafe in her own home. Her husband was finishing up school and they had just had a baby, so she was pretty sleep deprived. She was sick, and my brother-in-law wanted her to get some decent rest, so he stayed with the baby in the living room and the nursery to take care of her while my sister slept. My parents wanted to see the baby, so my brother-in-law came over to our house for a bit and just let my sister rest. It should be noted that my brother-in-law is extremely paranoid even though we live in a low-crime area. He's from a sketchy Midwestern town, so it makes sense. He makes sure the doors and windows are locked before leaving, and half wakes my sister up to let her know he's going to our house with the baby and that he'll get some dinner on the way back. My sister sleepily agrees and falls back asleep. Fast forward a couple of hours, my sister has to wake up to breastfeed because her chest is starting to hurt. She prolongs this and tosses and turns for a while because she was still exhausted and didn't want to get up. Once she starts coming to, she realizes the house is super cold. Once she actually opens her eyes, she hears the front door shutting. But she's super out of it. Assuming it's her husband, she calls out his name but gets no answer. The room is pitch black and all of the other lights in the house are off, so she can't see anything. Suddenly, she gets a really horrible feeling she can only describe as stepping into a freezing shower. She gets up and checks the thermostat, which was fine. She assumes she just feels cold because she's sick. She turns on some lights and does a quick turn about the house and realizes no one else is home and the front door is still locked. This obviously freaks her out, and she texts her husband to ask when he'll be home. He gets home not long after, they have dinner, and he stays with the baby in the living room and sleeps on the couch. My sister notices that one of the windows in the bedroom is open, and she says she doesn't remember opening it, but that would explain why she was so cold earlier. Her husband makes sure to check that all of the windows are shut and the door is locked after my sister explains to him the weird feeling she got earlier. Later, she wakes up again around 2 AM to pump, and that disgusting feeling creeps up again. She shoots up out of bed and can barely make out someone standing at the foot of the bed. She thinks it's her husband, similar height and build, so she asks him to bring her some water while she's prepping to pump. The figure doesn't move or speak. She repeats herself, and in what she describes as the most terrifying moment of her life, he answers her.
No, go back to sleep. I like to watch you sleep.
The voice definitely does not belong to her husband. She turns on her side desk lamp and starts screaming at this creeper wearing all black. He just starts giggling. Her husband jolts out of his sleep and she scrambles for the knife she has on her table, and the dude just books it through the window. He had opened it and climbed through. She knows for sure that he was watching her sleep earlier when she was napping, and that it was probably him that she had seen shutting the bedroom door earlier. They called the police and filed a report, but nothing really came out of it because he didn't technically do anything besides trespassing. They couldn't be sure if they could charge him with breaking and entering because my sister doesn't remember if she opened the window or not. They have no idea how he didn't injure himself when he jumped out of the window because when my brother-in-law ran out the back to give chase, he had already disappeared. It's been a few years and nothing ever really came out of the investigation, but they had the windows and locks replaced. So, creepy guy that likes to watch people sleep, stay away from my family. You better hope we never meet. I live in a smaller European country, and at the time that this happened, it was safe to leave the door unlocked. I live in a smaller town. There was an open balcony connected to my main bedroom, and I live on the ground floor. It was a hot summer night, and my dad left the glass balcony door ajar to let some air in. His bed was right next to the balcony door, and he remembers waking up feeling uncomfortable and not being able to fall asleep again. In the meantime, it started raining. He started feeling frustrated and got up to smoke, stopping in his tracks when he saw fresh muddy footprints leading all the way to the glass door. They were about size 46 or 12.5 US, and it looked as if the person had been standing there for quite some time, possibly trying to break in but seeing my dad or something else. He quickly locked the door and went to check on me. It was after that incident that he enclosed the balcony. I was very young and I don't really remember it. That room is now my room, and the first time he told me the story I wasn't able to sleep for days. So, to the muddy footprints man, let's not meet. This happened to me a few years ago when I was 17. It was late one Thursday night, well after midnight. I was up finishing an assignment. I was flipping between my assignment and chatting to some friends on MSN Messenger. Oh, those were the days. I heard someone outside, talking to our dogs like they knew them. We had a border collie and a cattle dog, both super protective. I thought to myself, who would be coming into my house at 12 o'clock? The penny dropped. I quickly sent off a message to the friend I was chatting to saying, I think someone's trying to get into my house. Now, I live in a small town, and the house that this happened in was at the very top of a ridiculously steep hill. We never got foot traffic because of how awful it was to walk up. We never locked the back door, and in summer, which it was at the time, we left it open to catch the breeze. Plus, with the two dogs, no one was ever game to try and get in anyway. So I've just sent the message off, and I hear the familiar creak of the gate swinging open, and then the click of it shutting, and footsteps walking in through the laundry. My blood runs cold. I'm stuck in my chair, trying to figure out what I'm about to meet. The footsteps get closer, and this very large man slumps up against the doorframe. I think he was drunk, I'm not sure. "Who the hell are you?" I blurt out at him. He starts using the furniture to walk closer to me as he isn't very steady. How the hell he got up the hill, up the concrete stairs, and to this point is beyond me. "What the hell are you doing in my house?" I ask, trying not to panic. Thankfully the furniture ends before he can get to me. He walks backwards and sits down on the couch. He mumbles to me over and over,
I'm just gonna sit down here. I'm just gonna sit down here. I'm just gonna sit down here.
I'm trying to figure out what the hell to do next. The phone isn't close by, my parents are asleep up the hallway, and I have to walk near him to get there. My younger sister is in the room closest to me, asleep. No one knows what's happening. I'm not game to turn my back on him and message my friend again. I'm also dressed in just underwear and a tank top. No bra. I stand up and say, "I'm just gonna go to bed now." As I stand up, he realizes how I'm dressed. He also stands up and says,
My, you have a sexy ass, don't you?
He starts to get closer to me. I bolt through the kitchen, up the hallway, and fling myself on top of my dad, yelling about the drunk man in the house. I don't think I've ever run so fast or screamed that loud. My parents finally register what's happening, Dad gets up, and this man is halfway up the hallway, having followed me. So this creepy, somewhat drunk, high man now has a tall, angry man yelling to get out of his house. He sprints out of the house and down the hill. My mum was on the phone to the police, and our next door neighbours had heard my dad roaring and also called the cops. My best friend lived in that house, and she came out and comforted me. Her dad, who was over 6 foot and built like a brick house, came over and sat in the front yard until the cops turned up. 4 cop cars arrived, it must have been a slow night. 2 marked cars, undercover detectives, and the dog squad. My street looked like a disco party. They eventually caught him, and he was charged with drunk and disorderly behaviour and trespassing. I saw my friend, the one I had been messaging, the next day, and I explained everything. He thought I was joking. Good to know that if there's ever a next time, I don't message him. To this day, I'm not sold on him being truly drunk or intoxicated. He seemed to be coherent in places, and being able to get where he was, you really couldn't do that if you were completely plastered. Having the ability to talk down the dogs like that. We didn't really live near any pubs, so he had to live nearby, and I would walk to school every day. So maybe he'd seen me then? Someone in our neighbourhood had just found out that a pedophile had been relocated to our neighbourhood. So who knows? Was it him? I've never forgotten that night, or my fear. There's always the what ifs, like, what if I had been the only one home? What if he had gotten a hold of me? Random man, possibly pedophile, who came into my house? Let's not meet again.